Good morning. Welcome, beloved, to Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I'm Reverend Dr. Robin Tanner, a member of the lead ministry team. My pronouns are she and hers, and I'm so grateful on this slightly gray day, really gray day in New Jersey, that you chose to be here with us. Wherever here may be, I welcome our virtual audience as well as those beautiful smiling faces. It's all in the eyes. I can see through your masks, those beautiful smiling faces in this space. My words, beloved, are coming to you from the lands of the Lenni Lenape, and I welcome those who are online to share with us your name and your pronouns so that we can greet you. This morning, for those of you who are here in person, we have a brief tour led by a member of our welcome team, Dick, who I think is going to come through the doors here in a moment, called from the great voice, right, Dick? Dick's going to meet you right up here by the pulpit to give you just about a 10-minute tour, and the tour ends at coffee hour. So that, how can you beat that, right? If it's your first time or your second time with us, I welcome you to join Dick for that tour after this service. It takes each of us in truth to live into our mission of radical inclusion, feeding the human spirit, and healing the world. Each of us brings a spark, a bit of light, even against the gray cast day here in New Jersey. It is a gathering of those lights that allows us to become a beacon together. So we turn now, led by our worship associate, Missy Rogers, to kindle the light of our faith.
Come now, the spirit of ancient ones who had the daily courage to keep living, so that generations from now we would be here, living dreams not even gasped at for so many of our heroes and sages. Come now, spirit of the child, with no reason for courage except the tenacity of life, like a dandelion in concrete, like an aspen releasing to the winter with the courage that spring returns. Come now, fires of the present moment, the ordinary, extraordinary, animating our days and dancing like flames in our dreams. Come now, courageous companions. It is time to gather round the fire once more.
Would you please join in singing hymn number 1018? This is Come and Go With Me. It's 1018. And if you would like to stand in body or spirit, we could do that too to get our breath going. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where
my name is Tuli, and my pronouns are she, hers, and I am going to need your help in telling this story. There are some sounds and some actions that you all need to make. How about first, can you make wind blowing sound? Ooh, there we go, excellent. Here's a more challenging one. How about getting stuck? Good job on getting stuck. And how about rowing? Oh, wait a minute, you don't row you row. Ha, people who haven't rowed before, in order to make your boat go forward, you gotta row backward. Is that right? No? No? Forward? Well, however you row. Okay, here you go. All right. So, have you ever known someone who believes that good things can always happen? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah. That even when things look uncertain, they hold on to the hope that ultimately everything is going to turn out okay. Our story this morning is about a person just like that, a simple farmer, yes, named Thomas Potter, who believed in his tiny portion of New Jersey, a place called Good Luck, a message of love could be shared with people. What do you think Thomas Potter might have grown on his farm? Corn. Okay, thank you, Nancy. Some other things that Thomas Potter, maybe it wasn't a vegetable or a grain farm, maybe it was like chickens or pigs or things like that, who knows, right? So Thomas Potter had a farm near the lands that originally and still belonged to the Lenni Lenape. Thomas was illiterate. Illiterate means that he didn't know how to read or write. He couldn't read things like the newspaper or religious books like the Bible, so he had to listen to other people's understanding of the world, and these messages that he heard did not make him feel good. At the time that Thomas Potter lived, a lot of people used fear to get people to be good. But Thomas Potter believed that there was good in everyone. Potter had grown up as a Quaker, a religion that believes that there's a little bit of God or love in everyone. He wanted to share this message with his friends and neighbors, and he believed that he could help it happen if he built a church for the community to hear about it. So in 1760, some of my math people, how many years ago is that? Come on, you can do it. 1760. 252. 52. 262? 262 years ago, he completed building a tiny one-room chapel, just like a room like this without the balcony, tiny, tiny. With courage, board by board, nail by nail, from the sandy shores of marshy land, he carefully and slowly built a chapel. But there was no minister to preach a message of hope or love that Potter could call on. Year after year, he waited and waited for the right kind of person to show up. It must have been so frustrating and to be waiting like that. I wonder if he shouted his frustration to the skies or maybe kicked the chapel when he was trying to weed around it. What do you all do when you're frustrated? You storm? Does anybody throw something? Like anybody ever flung a plate across the room? Nobody sings sweet songs, right? When you're frustrated, you don't go to that song singing place. Sorry, what was that?
It's very satisfying to throw a plate.
It's very satisfying to throw a plate, except if there's nobody else to clean up the mess. I sometimes sit in the car with the windows rolled up and bang on the steering wheel and say every bad word that you can think of. All right, so for 10 long years, Thomas Potter waited. He had the courage to wait. He was brave. When he had wrung his clothes out, why would he need to wring his clothes out? No washing machines. Remember, 262 years ago, right? No washing machines. When he wrung his clothes out, when he kicked his bed covers off, when he put on his house slippers, he waited with courage. And then in 1770, that's 252 years ago, which is why I was confused, a ship got stuck on a sandbar near Potter's Chapel. On this ship was a minister named John Murray. Reverend Murray was a Universalist minister, and he believed that God was too good to scare us into doing the right thing. He believed that God is love, and that since each of us has a little bit of God in us, we are love too. But John Murray had had a hard time. His wife and son had just died. He had fallen into debt. That means he owed a lot of money. And he vowed to give up all religion, especially Universalism. The captain of a ship, remember the ship got stuck? Right. The captain of the ship needed a volunteer to go ashore to buy supplies. And guess who volunteered? There you go. And so he rowed, however you all row. And he went, and when he got to shore, a hand reached out to help him come ashore. By the way, the name of the boat was Hand in Hand, and here he had a hand helping him come to shore. That was Thomas Potter. They got to talking, and Potter helped him with supplies. And as they were talking, Potter realized that Murray was who he had been waiting for. Potter the farmer begged Murray the preacher to speak in his chapel because he was exactly the kind of person who had the exact message that he wanted to hear. Murray said that he had to go back to deliver the supplies, right? He had given up religion, but Potter really begged him to reconsider. And Murray said, if we're still stuck on this on the sandbar on Sunday, I'll come preach. The ship stayed stuck. So Murray preached a Universalist message of hope in Potter's chapel that Sunday. As soon as he finished, guess what started blowing? Ooh, there we go. And he went back to his boat and they sailed on. And Universalism had finally arrived in America. Thomas Potter hoped for a message of love to share with his friends and community. He was patient and had the courage and faith that it would be okay. And it was. Here ends our story for all ages. You can clap.
Good morning. I'm Jeannie Siegel, and I am a chaplain here at Beacon. Chaplains at Beacon extend the spiritual care of our community. And one of the rituals of our spiritual care is the candle lighting ceremony. And that is where we light candles of joy, of sorrow, and of gratitude. Today, we will start out by lighting a memorial candle for Warren Story's sister, Hilly Gertz, who passed away. We also next we'll light a candle of sorrow for the many people who were impacted by this most recent hurricane in parts of Florida, in parts of the Southeast, and in Cuba. Also, the people in Puerto Rico and Honduras who are still struggling with serious flooding, and the people in Jackson, Mississippi, who still don't have potable water. We light a candle for gratitude to all of our responders, all of the firefighters and the EMTs and the police and the emergency volunteer rescue teams and the Good Samaritans who helped so many people during the most recent hurricane and will continue to do so for probably months to come. And we light a candle of joy because on Friday, Ketanji Brown Jackson took her seat at Supreme Court. She is now Justice and will begin her work on Monday. For all this and so much more, we invite you now to come up, light a candle, You could do it here, you could do it at home, you could do it wherever you are. Please come.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We are sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We are seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We are sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We are seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. I invite you to turn back to the hymnal at number 1011 to sing Return Again in this time in the Jewish calendar, the days of awe between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are. Return
Would you take a breath with me if you find ease in breath now? Perhaps bringing your gaze to the candles before us, the joys, the sorrows, the longings of this community. Gather in for a time of listening and dialogue. For the love that goes beneath all life, our source and return, the animation of atoms, the constant recalculation of what is possible. For all that is our lives, the daily doses of kindness, the way the coffee or tea is warmed and welcoming, the smile of a stranger, the crisp breeze inviting us to shift, to change. The laughter of children returning to school, returning again to rituals so familiar in these days of awe. Daily blessings, blessings of music, the notes still dancing in our hearts. Call forth now in your being those blessings which persist and have emerged in this week for you. Returning again to this center, to this knowing, to this deeper peace. Holding here too the losses, the worry for siblings caught in the storm, repairing and reconstructing lives from the rubble. Holding here as well the worries of what is yet to be. Seismic shifts that each of us feel and carry. Abiding a moment longer in this connection beneath all that seems distant and lost, knowing there is something holding us. Rest in that love, that life, now. Feel its power even here with you. Take it not as to be withheld from the world, but as the greatest gift we are called to share. So may we give of this love freely in the week to come. So may we drink of its nourishing waters. Amen, and blessed be.
Our reading this morning is an excerpt from Courage by Anne Sexton. It is in the small things we see it, the child's first step, as awesome as an earthquake, the first time you rode a bike wallowing up the sidewalk, Later, if you faced the death of bombs and bullets, you did not do it with a banner. You did it with only a hat to cover your heart. If your buddy saved you and died in so doing, then his courage was not courage, it was love. Love as simple as shaving soap. Later, if you have endured a great despair, then you did it alone, getting a transfusion from the fire, picking the scabs off your heart, then wringing it out like a sock. Next, my kinsman, you powdered your sorrow. You gave it a back rub, and then you covered it with a blanket, and after it had slept a while, it woke to the wings of the roses and was transformed. Later, when you face old age in its natural conclusion, your courage will still be shown in the little ways. Each spring will be a sword you'll sharpen. Those you love will live in a fever of love, and you'll bargain with a calendar. And at the last moment, when death opens the back door, you'll put on your carpet slippers and stride out. Here ends our reading.
Thank you, Missy. Thank you, Ann Sexton. I am so grateful that we are joined today for this special plate collection, the first of 3 weeks, by Jamie Thal. Jamie is co-chair of the Unitarian Universalist Faith Action New Jersey Reproductive Justice Task Force and a member of the Morristown Unitarian Fellowship, just up the road a piece, if you will. And Jamie is here to share with us about the life-saving, life-critical work that she is doing in the wake of the Supreme Court decision. Jamie?
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I am Jamie Thal. I use she, her pronouns, and I am really delighted to be here with you today. Reproductive justice, as defined by Sister Song, is the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children we have in safe, sustainable communities. Our task force work embraces that definition and is focused on maternal health, comprehensive sex education, menstrual equity, and abortion access. As UUs, we affirm the right to abortion care. In January, New Jersey passed the Freedom of Reproductive Choice Act, guaranteeing the right to abortion for all persons in the state of New Jersey. That was a terrific step. However, the bill that passed did not include funding to provide abortion care for people who are uninsured, underinsured, or undocumented. The most vulnerable folks, including young people, are the ones for whom abortion access is often impossible. Rights without access are meaningless. Today, I am here to encourage you to support the New Jersey Abortion Access Fund. The financial cost of an abortion for a patient is not just the expense of medical care, although that can be quite a significant sum. When you include costs like lost wages, transportation, childcare, the expenses add up quickly, making abortion care almost impossible for many to afford. Some patients face agonizing choices. Maybe they'll skip a rent payment in order to afford the health care they need. These financial hurdles can also delay care for patients, resulting in them needing more complex procedures and then again incurring more cost. These folks need our help. The New Jersey Abortion Access Fund steps forward to provide that help. They partner directly with abortion clinics here in New Jersey to provide funding to help offset some of these costs. And let me be clear, the fund has never had enough money to cover the entire cost of an abortion, maybe once in a blue moon. But they do provide enough to make it possible. The Access Fund is completely volunteer run and led, so you know that when you make and donation to the fund, all of the money goes directly to patient care. I also serve as a clinic escort, and I do know firsthand from that work how essential this support can be to patients. So today I'm here to ask you to please give generously. By doing so, you are affirming our UU belief that we are all, no matter our economic or legal status, entitled to bodily autonomy and the freedom to make our own decisions. Thanks for your support.
Our morning offering taken for the New Jersey Abortion Access Fund will now be most gratefully received. Thank you. Thank you for your generosity.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine. All through the night, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Thank you, Misa. Thank you, John. You know, beloved, every time we tell that story of John Murray and Thomas Potter, and I guess collectively as a faith, we've told it for a while, 262 years, I guess 252 if we count from when John Murray arrived. Every time the fish gets a little bigger, to be honest. It's true. Thomas Potter was an ordinary farmer with a dream that universalism could be brought to his community and across the land far beyond the shores of New Jersey. Against this, we have to remember, was a generation who had been raised on sinners in the hands of an angry God, right? the sermon famously preached by Jonathan Edwards in 1741, detailing the tortures of hell and the wrath of an angry God to his disobedient children. I know that really gets you excited, but unfortunately, our kin didn't go that way. Two dominant trends prevailed in Christianity at that time in Thomas Potter's world. One was the insistence that non-believers needed the terrifying threat of hell to awaken to their sinfulness and become true believers. This was the premise of the Great Awakening, after all. The second was a strict Calvinism that believed that God had already predestined humanity to heaven or hell. Imagine your life being essentially pointless, preordained by an aloof and uncaring God. These were the options: angry God or aloof God. Appealing. Despite the fiery sermons and the frozen ones, Thomas Potter, an ordinary farmer, believed that something more loving, something more just, something more peaceful was possible. In the words of Howard Zinn, to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act, Zinn continues, in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents. And to live now as we think human beings should live in defiance of all that is bad around us is itself a marvelous victory. Potter had the courage to say it out loud. He believed in God as love, and what's more, he declared that hell was therefore impossible. God as love meant a source more expansive and more compassionate, more merciful than the most compassionate, most merciful human being. And so how could such a God send any human to eternal suffering? And certainly such a God was not a dispassionate judge, allocating some to saving and others to slaughter. No, God was love, said Potter, plain and simple. And so he began to gather others in his home with his wife, Mary, to teach about this universalism. Imagine the courage as an illiterate farmer to speak out against the prevailing preachers of the day who had a good deal of power. Back then, when they built a university, the first thing they built was does anyone know? Seminary. Because they believed the teaching of ministers was the first foundation to society. I tend to agree, but some things weren't all bad. I tried to imagine that year it took him to build that chapel, and then the 9 that followed when no one arrived to preach. When Murray did finally arrive a decade later, it was September 30th, 1770, Thomas Potter was then 81 years old. He had waited his entire life for this moment. And John Murray looked him in the eye and said, "I will absolutely not preach." Imagine the despair he could have felt standing on those shores at that moment after all the years. Murray would later say of Thomas Potter, He had unbounded benevolence, was a friend to strangers, and a feeling, faithful man whose hospitable doors were open to everyone and whose heart was devoted to God. We know how the story ends. He was persuasive, and John Murray did preach about Universalism. 7 years after that first sermon was preached on the shores of the lands of the Lenni Lenape, Thomas Potter would die at the age of 88 years old. Now, I think I can guess what at least a few of you are thinking as we enter into this month's theme, which is courage. I'm not courageous. I'm no superhero like Thomas Potter. I'm not a preacher like John Murray. I'm an ordinary person. And courage is something for history books. Last week on Saturday, we launched the Beacon Hope and Equity Center at 695 Springfield Ave. A supporting organization of this congregation, Beacon Hope and Equity, is devoted to decolonizing wealth through microgrants, low-barrier applications for individuals and families to get money to pay the rent, to buy groceries, to cover the light bill, and unexpected medical costs, access to abortion, school supplies. We began planning this organization in 2019, and we had grand plans to publicly launch later in 2020. But then a little something happened. Against the backdrop of those early days of school at home, meetings in bedroom closets, anyone remember that? Anyone take a meeting in your bedroom closet, or was it just me? Okay, thanks, Lisa. The global uncertainty that blanketed us. Here at Beacon, the folks planning for Beacon Hope and Equity decided instead of delaying our work, we would accelerate it. Without C3 status from the IRS and no hope in sight of hearing back from the IRS in the foreseeable future, we reached out to community organizers and partners like Unidad Latina en Acción and Black Lives Matter Patterson. We asked, could they help us get money out into the community? And indeed, they were willing, even as they were swimming in community aid requests, their own crises and family needs and sickness from COVID-19. Together over the next 2 years, we gave out tens of thousands of dollars, including a $25,000 matching grant for newer immigrants and their families who are undocumented as relief aid here in Summit. We also worked with RIP medical debt and forgave over $2 million of medical debt across New Jersey. On Saturday, we celebrated this work, and we decided the best way to do it was to honor some of the very community organizers who had partnered with us over the last 2 years, including Anton Henshaw from Transformative Justice Initiative, Ana Paula Pazmina from Unidad Latina en Acción, and Jennifer Garcia of New Labor. We learned that our work is needed now just as much as it was in those early days of the pandemic, perhaps even more so as the impact of the pandemic continues to hit the poor the hardest. Each of the community organizers shared about their work, and Jennifer told us how she got engaged in community organizing because her dad was injured at work and there were no workplace protections for him. She started organizing with domestic workers and now is leading the charge for the Domestic Workers Protection Bill here in New Jersey. Ordinary, extraordinary people who gathered together and set against the messages of hate and despair, against the tide of all that was unknown and continues to be. Took phone call to phone call and created safety nets where there were none. Courage is cultivated, beloved, in community. Every gathering that Thomas Potter had in his home until his wife Mary kicked him out and insisted he built the chapel, every gathering gave him, I believe, a little bit more courage. Jennifer met with other organizers and domestic workers who said no to the treatment that they were receiving, no to life as it is, and set forth a vision of protection for domestic workers. Called by her father's story, she kept looking in the community until she found the people that would cultivate that courage together. Ordinary courage, magnified by shared commitment, is the only kind of courage that has ever transformed injustice into justice, pain into hope. We tell stories of single, solitary leaders, but there's no John Murray without Thomas Potter. And there's no Thomas Potter without all of the unknown people who gathered in his living room. I think of the courage of those traveling across miles to access abortion, or of those doctors and nurses in states where it is now illegal who stay and keep trying to provide access, of those who make the care packages, the donations, the flight arrangements. There's nothing superhuman about any of these people, as much as I'd like to make Jamie superhuman. The truth is, it's our very real humanity that makes the ordinary extraordinary. On the anniversary of John Murray's arrival, my colleague Reverend Lynn Unger wrote a beautiful poem entitled Moderation. Finally, the first sweet September rain. Already the lawn is showing signs of green and the air has relaxed. Across the country, the hurricane is still plowing a path of destruction. Whole towns underwater, a year's worth of rain in a day. The older I get, the more I cherish old-fashioned values: temperance, prudence, humility. We've seen what extreme and magnificent and huge can get us. These days, my longing is for lovely, possible, sufficient. I would like to live in the age of enough. Is it too late to build things that last, things worth repairing when they break? Is it worth rebuilding Florida when the sea is already crowding in? They'll find a way to go on, because that is what the living do. At this point, we're all starting over, building from the rubble of our expectations. What if the vision were not spires of gold, but the contentment of a ginger cat, curled and glowing in the sun? I love that line, and I also am disturbed by it. At this point, we're all starting over, building from the rubble of our expectations. Recovering in this pandemic, I can no longer preach the big flash sermons to be a superhero. They feel disingenuous. But I've witnessed in the community organizers something more powerful than cartoon heroes, something more true than the fiery, fearful words, something more lasting than even a single Supreme Court decision. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is not the belief even that we will succeed. It is the community-cultivated choice to act in the midst of fear without the guarantee of success. It is the willingness to be drawn by something bigger than the present facts. Many years ago, I companioned a friend to access abortion. She was in a very bad, abusive relationship, and the thought of having a child in that relationship was impossible. We were living in upstate New York at the time. It was a time when a clinic had been bombed, there had been threats. It was a very, very tense and extraordinary situation. And I remember Nancy and I going to that clinic I remember having to push through with an escort through the throngs of protesters and their terrible signs and words. I remember sitting with her after the procedure was done and then driving her home. What I remember the most was noticing the ordinary courage of the nurses and the doctors, the escort who took Nancy's hand, and without a word, just reassured her with her eyes as we went through those protesters. Nancy's life is 100% different and better and transformed for having access to that abortion. She went on to have an extraordinary career, 2 beautiful children, and a very happy life, none of which would have been possible without the ordinary courage of those nurses and doctors, of the community organizers who had fought a generation prior, of the escort who took Nancy's hand, and of course, of Nancy herself to imagine a future that was larger than the present facts of that moment. I want to invite us, to invite you, to join me now in that kind of courage. Not the magnificent, single, solitary leader, not the wild abandonment of facts or moderation or caution, but the courage to choose, to see in the community a hope seated, a possibility other than the rage and the fear, the present politics apart, but not the final story. A courage to choose a broader ending where we are whole and well and free. To cull from the disaster of a ship stuck on the shores of New Jersey a whole religion and a renewed way to be human here on these shores. Courage, friends. Courage together. Take courage, friends. That ordinary, extraordinary light you each bring, that together will be a beacon.
Let the life I've lived speak for me. Let the life I've lived speak for me. When I come to the end of this road and I lay down my heavy load, let the life I've lived speak for me. Let the work I've done speak for me. Let the work I've done speak for me. When I come to the end of the road and I lay down my heavy load, let the work I've done
remember the words, especially if you're going to jail for justice. It's a good one. I don't think any of y'all are going to jail today, at least. I hope that you're going to coffee hour after this. And those who've joined us online, I welcome you to fill out our guest form so that we can be in touch with you virtually to connect. Would you take hands, beloved, if you're willing and able, or perhaps place hands on shoulders? And take a moment and look around at the faces of one another. And those of you who are online, I invite you to gaze into my eyes. We extinguish now this chalice, but we do not extinguish the greater light, the greater source, for that goes with each of you. May it animate your life, nourish and strengthen you until we meet again, and what's more, may you give of that light freely, knowing it is never diminished, but magnified in its sharing. Shine on, beacon, shine on. Amen. Blessed be.